The Mongol invasions of Vietnam in the late 13th century, initiated by Kublai Khan, encompassed three major military campaigns aimed at subjugating the Dai Viet kingdom. The first invasion in 1258 led to a brief Mongol occupation of the capital, Thăng Long, modern Hanoi. But subsequent invasions in 1285 and 87 faced robust resistance, led by General Tran Hong Dao. The Vietnamese utilized guerrilla tactics and intimate knowledge of the local terrain effectively, culminating in the decisive Battle of Bac Dang River during the third invasion. It was here the Vietnamese employed a strategic ploy involving underwater stakes that devastated the Mongol fleet at high tide, leading to a significant defeat and eventually the withdrawal of Mongol forces, thereby affirming Vietnamese resilience and independence against one of history's most terrifying military powers. Hello and welcome to the channel. Perhaps I should say good morning, perhaps good afternoon, or good evening. But if you're new to the channel, I'll just say welcome. And if you're coming back, welcome back for another video. Great to have you here again. As always, if you want to support the channel by clicking on the video, you've already done it. But if you want to go above and beyond, perhaps you should take a look in the video description. A like and subscribe is only one click away too, if you feel so inclined. Now, without further ado, and continuing these last few days of East Asian and Mongol history, let's get nice and relaxed, and we may begin. By the mid-1250s, the vast Mongol Empire expanded its control across a significant portion of Eurasia, encapsulating territories such as Eastern Europe, Anatolia, North China, Mongolia, Manchuria, Central Asia, Tibet, and even as far as Southwest Asia. The ruler Mongol Khan, whose reign spanned from 1251 to 59, orchestrated comprehensive plans to conquer the Song dynasty in southern China. His strategic approach in 1259 avoided a direct and perilous assault across the Yangtze River by choosing instead to establish a strong operational base in the southwestern part of China, which would facilitate a more manageable flanking maneuver against the armies of the Song. Now, during the Kurultai, that's kind of the leadership meeting of the Mongols in the summer of 1252, Mongol commissioned his brother Kublai to spearhead the campaign in the southwest, targeting the region of Sichuan. By autumn of the same year, a formidable Mongol force of over 100,000 advanced to the Tao River, subsequently breaching the Sichuan basin. This force overpowered the local Song military presence and established a significant strategic foothold in the area. Thus, the campaign's expansion continued into 1253, when Mongol learned of the refusal of Duan Xingzhi, the ruler of the Dali kingdom in Yunnan, to negotiate. Further exacerbating the situation was the murder of Mongol's envoys by Dali's prime minister, Gao Xiang. In response, Mongol ordered a robust military response, led by Kublai and Uriyankadai. By September of 1253, Kublai initiated a three-pronged assault on Dali, involving coordinated movements from both the Western Army under Uriang Khatai, from Gansu through Tibet, and an eastern contingent led by Wang Dezhen from Sichuan. The Mongol forces of course faced stiff resistance from Dali's troops along the Jinsha River, leading to several intense skirmishes. Utilizing innovative tactics, Kublai's army crossed the river using rafts made from inflated sheepskins under the cover of darkness, managing to outmaneuver and disrupt the Dali forces. This strategic maneuver precipitated a swift collapse of Dali's military resistance, culminating in the capture of the capital on December 15, 1253. Despite the initial resistance, the city and its populace were spared from destruction. Post-capture, Duan Xingzhi and Gao Xiang attempted to flee, while Gao Xiang was captured and executed shortly after. Duan continued to resist from Shanchan, which is present-day Kunming, with local support until his eventual capture in the autumn of 1255. The Mongols, maintaining their typical strategy, kept the native Duan dynasty nominally in power, albeit under strict Mongol oversight. The remnants of the Duan clan were then co-opted to assist the Mongols in further military campaigns against neighboring regions such as the Burmese Pagan Empire and, of course, Dai Viet, showing the Mongols' pragmatic approach to leveraging local structures and leadership for their imperial ambitions. So, by the end of 1254, after securing significant advancements in the southwestern region of China, Kublai Khan felt the need to return to Mongolia for discussions with his brother Mongol Khan concerning the Khaganate's leadership. During his absence, the responsibility for maintaining and expanding Mongol control over Yunnan was left to Uriang Khatai, who actively campaigned against the local Yi and Lolo tribes from 1254 to 57. His success in subduing these groups ultimately solidified Mongolian authority in the region. In early 1257, Uriang Khatai reported back to Mongol Khan's court, confirming the stability and control over Yunnan. His effective leadership and military successes were recognized and awarded by the emperor, further bolstering his status and position within the imperial Mongol framework. Following this, Uriang Khatai returned to Yunnan to organize for further expansion, this time directing his attention towards Southeast Asia, particularly the Dai Viet kingdom. Now let's set the scene. You see, Dai Viet had emerged in the 960s, carving out a distinct territory of their own in the Red River Delta from the remnants of the Tang regime after the empire's collapse in 907. The Vietnamese kingdom, through successive dynasties, had maintained a consistent and regulated tributary relationship with the Chinese Song dynasty, showcasing its diplomatic finesse and regional autonomy. But, of course, it couldn't last forever. The peace was disrupted in autumn of 1257 when Uriang Khatai dispatched envoys to the Vietnamese ruler Tran Tai Tong, demanding not only submission, but also passage through Vietnamese territory to facilitate a Mongol attack on the Song dynasty from the south. Seeing the strategic threat posed by allowing a foreign army to traverse his domain and attack a neighboring ally, Tran Tai Dong refused the demands. The Mongol envoys were subsequently imprisoned as a signal of Dai Viet's resistance. This act of defiance understandably angered the Mongols and prompted a military response from Uriang Khatai. Thus, he launched an invasion into Dai Viet with a substantial force, including key generals Trechadu and Aju, aiming to subdue the Vietnamese and secure the desired passage for operations against the Song. In early 1258, Uriang Khatai, the accomplished son of the legendary Mongol general Subutai, led his significant military expedition into Dai Viet from his base in Yunnan. Thus, this campaign was a continuation of their efforts to expand their empire and strategic positions against the southern Song, and they wanted to use Dai Viet as a potential pathway or even a completely new base of power. Vietnamese historical records indicate that the Mongol invading force was nothing to be scoffed at, numbering at least 30,000 soldiers, which included a significant component of 2,000 Yi troops from the recently subjugated Dali kingdom. These numbers reflect the scale and preparedness of the Mongol military endeavors during this period. They were not doing things by half. But of course, modern scholarship often provides a more conservative estimate of the size of the Mongol forces. It suggests that several thousand Mongol troops were directly involved, with Uriang Khatai at the helm, a figure that typically includes around 3,000 Mongol cavalry, renowned for their mobility and effectiveness in battle, supported by an additional contingent of approximately 10,000 Yi soldiers, indicating a diverse composition that utilized local forces from the Mongol-controlled territories. The combined force engaged with Vietnamese defenders on the 17th of January 1258. The battle was part of the Mongols' broader strategy under Kublai Khan's directive, aiming not only to expand their territorial control, but also to establish a more advantageous position against the southern Song. The Battle of Bing Le Nguyen marked a significant encounter during the Mongol invasion of Dai Viet in 1258, where the use of war elephants by the Vietnamese was notably countered by the strategic responses of the Mongol forces. Emperor Tran Tai Tong himself led his army from atop an elephant, embodying the traditional warfare tactics of the region. However, his strategy backfired when the Mongol general Aju cleverly ordered his archers to target the elephant's feet, causing the animals to panic and turn chaotically. This disruption led to a rout of the Vietnamese forces, causing disarray and a hasty retreat by the Vietnamese leaders, who escaped on pre-prepared boats. Following the chaos at Binh Le Nguyen, the remaining Vietnamese forces suffered another significant defeat the next day at the Battle of the Phu Lo Bridge. This series of defeats forced Emperor Tran Tai Tong to evacuate the capital, which he reportedly did in a disorderly and panicked manner, contrary to the official annals that depicted an organized withdrawal. The rapid retreat left behind weapons and other resources, which fell into the hands of the pursuing Mongols. Upon occupying the capital, the Mongols discovered their envoys imprisoned, one of whom had already succumbed. In the retaliation, they massacred the inhabitants of Thăng Long, although they did not extend their destructive behavior as they advanced northwards towards Yunnan, earning a contrasting reputation as Buddhist enemies for their restraint in looting and unnecessary violence. Despite their successful capture of the capital, Mongol control was limited to the city, as the surrounding provinces remained firmly under Vietnamese command. The campaign in Dai Viet was part of a larger Mongol strategy to flank the Song by establishing a base to their southwest. After a brief occupation, Uryang Kadai, not deterred by the climate as often misinterpreted from Chinese sources, continued his military campaign by moving to invade the Song territory in modern-day Guangxi as part of a coordinated assault that included Mongol forces attacking in Sichuan under Mongol Khan and others in Shandong and Henan. The loss of his capital and a prince eventually compelled Emperor Trần Tông to submit to the Mongols, marking a significant, although not conclusive, point in the Mongol efforts to subdue Dai Viet. A month after his escape from the capital in 1258, Trần Tông returned to Dai Viet and initiated a diplomatic and tributary relationship with the Mongols. This move was a strategic one, positioning the Mongols as peers alongside the southern Song dynasty, with whom Dai Viet also maintained ties. It was a period that marked the beginning of a new phase of foreign relations for Dai Viet, treating these powerful neighbors with dual diplomatic approach. Thus, in March 1258, Trần Tông had completely abdicated, passing the throne to his son, Prince Trần Hoang, who took the reins amidst a admittedly complex international scene. Not a very good time for him to begin his reign at all. In that same year, the new emperor reached out to the Mongols, sending envoys to their base in Yunnan, signaling a continuation of his father's policy of engagement. The submission of Dai Viet to Mongol authority proved beneficial for Uryang Kadai, who, leveraging the support from the new Vietnamese emperor, quickly mobilized an army consisting of 3,000 Mongol cavalry and 10,000 troops from Dali. With these forces, and via a route through Dai Viet, Uryang Kadai launched a renewed offensive against the Song dynasty in the summer of 1259. This campaign saw Mongol forces push deep into Song territory, reaching Guilin and advancing to Tanzhou in modern-day Hunan province. This military action was part of a broader Mongol strategy led by Mongol Khan. His life's work. He was hoping it would come to fruition. However, the Mongol campaign against the Song was abruptly halted by the sudden death of Mongol Khan in August of 1259. His demise led to a succession crisis within the Mongol Empire. You see, in Mongolia, Prince Arik Boker swiftly proclaimed himself ruler, while in China, Prince Kublai also declared his right to rulership. You can see how this gets a little bit complicated. This power struggle, which focused the Mongol Empire's energies on internal disputes, effectively put an end to their immediate imperial ambitions in China, and left the regions of Vietnam undisturbed for a time. This respite allowed the Vietnamese kingdoms a period of peace, as the Mongol focus shifted away from expansion towards resolving their leadership turmoil. Following the subjugation of the Song dynasty in 1276, the newly established Yuan dynasty under Kublai Khan redirected its expansive ambitions southwards, targeting Champa and Dai Viet, among other regions. You see, Champa was strategically vital due to its control over the maritime routes linking China with Southeast Asia and India. The Mongol court recognized the importance of dominating this key junction to control trade throughout Southeast Asia. It should be noted as well that controlling Champa would enable the Yuan access to valuable commodities traded across the Indian Ocean by Arab and Persian merchants. Despite the king of Champa's nominal acceptance of Mongol overlordship, his submission was reluctant and fraught with tensions. In the late 1281, Kublai planned a massive mobilization to assert control over regions including the Sukhothai, Lopburi, Malabar, and Champa in particular, from where he expected logistical support in the form of food supplies for his troops. However, these aggressive plans were eventually set aside in favor of a diplomatic approach, aiming to coerce these states into submission through envoys rather than outright military invasion. This strategic shift acknowledged the logistical challenges and the strong pro-Song sentiments in Champa, where the Cham king had shown sympathy towards the fallen Song dynasty. The situation was further complicated by the presence of Chinese officials, soldiers, and civilians who had fled the Mongol conquest and sought refuge in Champa. These refugees stirred up anti-Mongol and anti-Yuan sentiments, further complicating diplomatic efforts. In the summer of 1282, when Yuan envoys passed through Champa, they were detained by Prince Harijit, revealing the extent of local resistance. They were not welcome. In response to these provocations, Kublai Khan ordered Sogatu of the jailars, then the governor of Guangzhou, to lead a punitive expedition against Champa. Despite Kublai's acknowledgement of the innocence of Champa's old king, Jaya Indravarman V, he identified the opposition as stemming from the king's son Harijit and some southern Chinese. By late 1282, Sogatu launched a maritime invasion with 500 men aboard 100 ships and 250 landing crafts. This force, however, was a shadow of its intended strength. Many of the Yuan ships had been lost in previous failed invasions of Japan. Sogatu's arrival on the shores of Champa, near Tinai Bay, in February of 1283, marked a significant escalation in the Yuan's efforts to subdue the region. The Cham defenders, eagerly prepared for battle, had fortified their position with a wooden palisade on the west shore of the bay. The Mongol forces, undeterred by the formidable Cham defenses, launched a midnight assault on February 13th, attacking the stockade from 3 sides. The Cham forces, numbering around 10,000 men, and supported by scores of elephants, met the Yuan forces on the beach in a bold counterattack. Despite the strong defensive measures and the initial resistance, the experienced Mongol general Sogatu managed to penetrate the defenses, leading to a significant victory for the Yuan. the Mongols routed the Cham forces, capturing their forts and vast supplies. Sogatu then captured Vijaya, the Cham capital, within 2 days. However, instead of maintaining a presence in the city, he withdrew to camps outside the city limits. In the following days, the aging King Indravarman V abandoned the palace, setting fire to his warehouses to deny resources to the Yuan, and retreated into the hills, effectively avoiding capture. The refusal of the Cham king and Prince Harijit to meet with the Yuan and the execution of 2 captured Yuan envoys highlights the resolve of the Chams to resist Mongol rule. The situation escalated as Cham forces, using guerrilla tactics, continuously ambushed the Mongol troops in the mountainous regions. Realizing the challenges ahead, Sogatu prepared for a prolonged campaign by unloading supplies and clearing fields for rice farming, managing to harvest 150,000 piculs of rice by the summer. Meanwhile, diplomatic efforts to secure additional reinforcements and support continued. Sogatu's request for reinforcements was answered in March 1284, when another Yuan fleet, commanded by Atakai and Arik Kaya, arrived with over 20,000 troops. This new force anchored off the coast of Vijaya, bolstering the Yuan's position. Sogatu proposed a bold plan to invade Champa by marching through Dai Viet, a vassalized region, which Kublai Khan gave the approval. Togan, Kublai's son, was put in command of the operation, with Sogatu as his second-in-command. The political and diplomatic interactions between Kublai's Yuan dynasty and Dai Viet during the late 13th century were marked with increasing demands and a growing assertiveness from the Mongol Empire. Initially, in 1261, Kublai sought to solidify his control over Dai Viet by granting Tran Tan Tong the title of King of Annam, and establishing a Mongol administrative presence in the form of a Darugachi, Sayyid Ajal. Reports to the Yuan court indicated that the Vietnamese king engaged in corrupt practices with the Darugachi, which muddied the already complex relationship between the 2 realms. Thus, as the Yuan dynasty consolidated its power, Kublai, dissatisfied with the traditional tributary payments which mirrored those given to the former Song dynasty, escalated his demands in 1267. His son, Hugachi, was dispatched with a list of demands that significantly exceeded previous expectations. These included not just tributes of gold, silver, and precious materials, but also forced labor, direct taxes, and even control over local commerce, reflecting Kublai's intention to integrate, or rather subjugate, Dai Viet more thoroughly into the Yuan Empire's economic and administrative systems. Thus Kublai's ambitions expanded further when he assigned the title of Prince of Yunnan to the Yuan heir apparent in 1278, a move aimed at asserting control over the regions of Dali, Shanshan, and Dai Viet. This act was perceived as an attempt to annex Dai Viet directly into the Yuan Empire, a prospect that the Vietnamese leadership found completely unacceptable. Can't really blame them. Well, following the death of Tran Tai Tong in 1278, his successor, Tran Nan Tong, known to the Mongols as Tran Nat Ton, faced repeated demands from Kublai to present himself in China as a vassal. The refusal to comply led the Yuan to withhold recognition of his kingship, and the efforts were made to place a Vietnamese defector on the throne of Dai Viet, reflecting the Yuan's use of political intrigue to achieve their objectives. By 1283, frustrated with the lack of progress through diplomatic channels and the persistent Vietnamese resistance to his demands, Kublai tasked Arik Kaya with leading a more aggressive approach. Arik Kaya was thus sent to demand that Dai Viet participate in a military campaign against Champa, provide logistical and military support for Yuan forces, and comply with even more stringent economic demands. The Vietnamese king's steadfast refusal was not taken well. Thus, in the following year, the dynamics between Dai Viet and the Mongols and Champa became increasingly complex, as Kublai intensified his military ambitions in Southeast Asia. Togon, Kublai's son, was appointed to command a significant overland force, his mission ostensibly to support Sogatu in Champa, but with broader imperial objectives. Kublai's strategic aim was to launch a pincer movement against Champa, attacking from both the north through Dai Viet and from the south via Sogatu's forces. However, the Vietnamese leadership under Nan Tong discerned that this maneuver was likely a pretext for an outright conquest of Dai Viet itself. Thus, Prince Tran Quoc Tuan, a notable military leader, was tasked with organizing the defense against the impending Yuan threat. Preparations included bolstering Dai Viet's naval capabilities, as evidenced by the reported dispatch of 500 ships to aid Champa, indicating a regional response to the Yuan maneuvers. As 1284 progressed, Togon mobilized his forces at the borders of Dai Viet, signaling the imminent threat of an invasion. In a rather deceptive twist, reports emerged by December that Kublai Khan had commanded Togon and his generals not merely to assist in Champa, but to use the military campaign as simply a cover for a full-scale invasion of Dai Viet. The period also saw the integration of Southern Song Chinese military expertise into the Vietnamese defense strategy, with many Chinese military officers and civilian officials who had intermarried with the Vietnamese elite taking up roles within the Vietnamese and Cham defenses. These alliances were crucial, as they brought valuable military expertise and reinforced the interconnected resistance against the Mongol expansion. Marco Polo's travels during this tumultuous period further underscore the significance of the region in global trade and political dynamics. His journey through Dai Viet and onwards to Chengdu provides a rare European perspective on the complexities of the geopolitical importance of Southeast Asia during the late 13th century. His observations, while primarily focused on commerce and culture, inadvertently also document the preparations and anxieties of the local populations during a period of intense military threats from one of history's most formidable empires. Well, the Yuan's land invasion of Dai Viet in 1285 was commanded by Prince Togon and a Uyghur general by the name of Arik Kaya, while the naval forces were led by the Tangut general Li Heng and Muslim general Omar. Simultaneously, another Yuan column entered Dai Viet from Yunnan, commanded by the Khwarezmian general Nasr ad-Din bin Said Ajal, the governor of Yunnan, who had previously led a campaign against the kingdom of Bagan. The Vietnamese forces under the generalship of Tran Hung Dao totaled around 100,000 men, encompassing both land and naval units. The Yuan troops commenced their assault by crossing the Nam Tran Pass on the 27th of January 1285, and swiftly moved southward along the rivers, overcoming Vietnamese forces at the battles of Ca Lai and Noi Bang. The Mongol advance continued as they reached the stronghold of Prince Quoc Tuan and Van Kiep by February the 10th. Within 3 days, they breached the Vietnamese defenses to arrive at the north bank of the Cao River. By February 18th, the Mongols had commandeered captured boats and decisively defeated the Vietnamese forces, enabling them to cross the river successfully. Upon capturing soldiers, the Mongols executed those found with the words Sat Tat, or Death to the Mongols, tattooed on their arms, displaying strict punitive measures against resistance. Geez, I bet they regretted those tattoos, eh? Well, despite their successes, the Yuan forces did not advance further south but remained on the north bank of the river. This decision led to ongoing skirmishes, but no significant territorial gains, as they faced stiff resistance from the well-organized Vietnamese defenses across the river. In a strategic effort to solidify their positions in Dai Viet during the invasion of 1285, Togon coordinated a complex military operation involving multiple fronts. He instructed Officer Tang Gudai to relay orders to Sogatu, who was stationed in Hue, to advance northward through the pass of Nghệ An. This maneuver was part of a pincer movement intended to encircle the Vietnamese forces and facilitate a union with Togon's troops, who were simultaneously appealing for additional reinforcements from China. Togon also attempted diplomatic engagement, informing the Vietnamese king that the Yuan forces were positioned as allies against Champa, not as invaders of Dai Viet. By late February, Sogatu's forces had captured several critical locations, including the cities of Vinh and Thanh Hoa, as well as securing Vietnamese supply bases in Nam Dinh and Ninh Binh. These victories enabled the capture of 400 Song officers who had been aiding the Vietnamese, and the Mongols did not like it when they were aiding the Vietnamese. Well, despite efforts by Prince Quoc Tuan to disrupt this strategy and prevent the linking of Sogatu and Togon's forces, his attempts were unsuccessful, and his forces were eventually overwhelmed. The situation grew dire for Dai Viet, as Tran envoys extended peace terms that were summarily rejected by Togon and Omar. In response, Togon initiated a full-scale offensive, with Omar's fleet advancing along the Duong River. This aggressive push resulted in the capture of Thăng Long, forcing King Tran Nan Tong and his court to flee seaward. The king met with Tran Hung Dao in Quang Ninh to deliberate the possibility of surrender, but Tran Hung Dao, steadfast in his resistance, sought to rally the private armies of the Tran princes. The political landscape within Dai Viet began to fracture further, as many royals and nobles, overcome with fear, defected over to the Mongol side, including Prince Tran Ik Tak. However, the capture of the capital Thăng Long did not yield the strategic advantage the Yuan had hoped for. The city's granaries had been emptied, depriving them of crucial supplies. Togon himself entered an abandoned palace, symbolizing the hollow victory without strategic resources. Despite occupying the capital, the Yuan's position remained precarious as their forces, led by Omar, launched 2 naval offensives in April. These attacks pushed the Vietnamese further south, intensifying the military and logistical challenges for both sides. The Tran forces, now encircled by the Yuan army, and with their king in flight along the coast to Tan Hoa, faced grim prospects. However, the resistance led by figures like Tran Hong Dao and the continued maneuvering of the royal family underscored the resilience and complexity of Dai Viet's defense against the formidable Yuan onslaught. By May 1285, logistical strains began to manifest prominently for the Yuan forces in Dai Viet. As the supply lines overextended, Togon commanded Sogatu to assault Nam Dinh, the principal Vietnamese stronghold, to appropriate vital supplies. Concurrently, combat intensified, prompting Togon to issue retreat orders. He directed Sogatu to move back to Champa, and commanded Omar to facilitate a coordinated withdrawal along the Red River. Togon himself prepared for departure back to Siming in Guangxi, China, citing the challenging weather conditions and rampant disease as the primary reasons for withdrawal. The Vietnamese, however, capitalized on the Yuan's logistical and strategic disarray. In a significant naval engagement near Hum Tu, a partisan force composed of former Song troops led by Zhao Zhong, alongside Prince Nat Duat, and local militias achieved a decisive victory against a segment of Yuan forces. This victory was a turning point, and on June 9th, 1285, the Mongol forces began evacuating Thăng Long, marking the beginning of their full retreat from Dai Viet. Historical records provide differing perspectives on the retreat. The history of Yuan suggests that the withdrawal was due to Mongol troops' inability to adapt their combat techniques to the local environment, whereas Am Nim Chi Loc credits a forceful Vietnamese offensive for reclaiming their capital, La Tang, or also known as Thăng Long. Either way, seizing the strategic initiative, Prince Quoc Tuan led a Vietnamese contingent northward, launching a surprise attack on the Yuan encampment of Van Kiep, effectively cutting off their supply lines. This encounter proved fatal for many Yuan commanders, including the General Li Heng, who succumbed to a poisoned arrow. The battle's intensity culminated in the death of Sogatu at the Battle of Chuang Dong, struck down by a coalition force led by Tran Quang Kai, Pham Ngo Lao, and Tran Quoc Tan. In the chaos, Yuan forces scrambled to protect Togon by concealing him inside a copper box, allowing for a safe retreat to the Guangxi border. Meanwhile, Yuan generals Omar and Liu Gui, finding themselves isolated and desperate, fled to China by sea. By late June 1285, The remaining Yuan forces had retreated back to China, concluding a 6-month conflict that saw the Vietnamese king and his court triumphantly return to Thăng Long, reinstating their rule over the capital. Now, in the following year, 1286, sensing the need for a firmer hold in Dai Viet, Kublai appointed Prince Tran Ik Tak, the younger brother of Tran Tang Tong, as the king of Dai Viet from afar. Tran Ik Tak, who had previously surrendered to the Yuan and expressed willingness to lead a Yuan army to claim the throne, was definitely the golden boy among the options. Well, this move by Kublai came as preparations for a third invasion of Japan were halted in August, shifting the focus towards military actions in the south. Kublai accused the Vietnamese of conducting raids into China and insisted that efforts should be concentrated on defeating Dai Viet. Thus, in October of 1287, the Yuan dispatched substantial land and naval forces towards Dai Viet. The land forces, commanded by Togon and assisted by Nasr al-Din and Kublai's grandson Esen Temur, moved towards Guangxi and Yunnan. These forces were divided into 3 divisions led by General Abachi and Chang Yu. Concurrently, the naval expedition was led by Generals Omar, Zhang Wenhu, and Aolu Chi. The naval force which advanced from Qinzhou aimed to create a large pincer movement against the Vietnamese. It was a force that included 70,000 Mongols, Jurchen, and Han Chinese from various regions, alongside 6,000 troops from Yunnan, 1,000 troops who used to be loyal to the Song, 6,000 Guangxi troops, 17,000 Li troops from Hainan, that's the little island below Guangdong, by the way, and 18,000 crewmen, totaling up to 170,000 men. Thus, the early stages of the invasion saw the Yuan forces capturing and looting the Dai Viet capital. However, by January of 1288, a significant setback occurred when Omar's fleet, attempting to join Togon's forces in Van Kiep, was intercepted by the Vietnamese navy under Prince Tran Can Du, resulting in the destruction of Zhang Wenhu's supply fleet. Unaware of this loss, Togon and Omar continued their operations. In February, Togon looted food from the capital Thăng Long, and Omar desecrated King Tran Tai Tong's tomb in Tai Bin. By early March, due to dwindling supplies and untenable positions, Togon and Omar's forces retreated to their main base in Van Kiep. Plans were made to withdraw from Dai Viet entirely, awaiting delayed supplies before their departure. On the 30th of March, Togon ordered a retreat back to China, and during this retreat, he was also struck by a poisoned arrow and forced to abandon his ship, retreating through the forests of Siming in Guangxi with a small escort. The critical blow came in April of 1288, during the Third Battle of Bac Ding. Prince Hung Dao orchestrated a masterful ambush on Omar's retreating Yuan fleet. Hidden metal-tipped stakes in the riverbed impaled the Yuan ships, leading to a catastrophic defeat for the Yuan, with Omar taken prisoner. Zhang Wenhu, unaware of these developments, sailed his transport fleet into the same trap, resulting in further destruction for the Mongol forces. Thus the battle's aftermath saw the Yuan retreat in disarray, and the remnants of their army struggling to make contact with the main force. Many Yuan troops were lost, unfamiliar with the terrain. Le Tuc, a Vietnamese scholar who had defected to the Yuan in 1285, provided an account of retreating Yuan troops, noting that many died in the mountain passes between the Sino-Viet borderlands. Le Tuc himself was exiled permanently in China, later appointed by the Yuan government as the prefect of pacified Siam. That's Thailand, by the way. Well, following the Mongol campaigns against Dai Viet, which were ultimately repelled, Kublai's frustrations were as understandable as they were evident. In a turn of political strategy, he attempted to negotiate directly with Tran Nan Tong, the Vietnamese king, to forge a more compliant relationship. In 1291, he dispatched Zhang Li Dao, the Minister of Rights, to the Vietnamese capital to persuade Nan Tong to travel to China. Despite the diplomatic visit, Nan Tong declined to go to Dardu, modern-day Beijing, explaining the perilous journey that had previously resulted in the death of many Vietnamese envoys. Oh, right, that thing. I suppose it's hard to forget. Well, Nantong's diplomatic rebuttal included sending a golden statue as a token of apology for his inability to visit China, accompanied by a letter vividly describing the devastations and sacrileges committed by the Mongol armies during their invasions. They didn't forget that either. It was a poignant recount that highlighted the destruction of sacred Buddhist sites and the general brutality that was experienced by his people. So, he will not be attending the dinner party. Well, despite repeated attempts, another mission in September 1292, Kublai's plans to enforce direct control over Dai Viet completely failed. Kublai planned a fourth military campaign in 1293 to install the Vietnamese Prince Tran Ik Tak, who had defected to the Yuan as the king of Dai Viet. However, Kublai's death in early 1294 halted that plan. His successor, Temur Khan, opted for a more diplomatic approach, formally ending hostilities with Dai Viet and resuming a tributary relationship that had been tentatively established following the earlier invasions. In the wake of such invasions, Dai Viet had suffered greatly. Its capital, Thăng Long, razed and significant losses to its population and cultural heritage. Nevertheless, the Vietnamese kept resisting the Mongol demands effectively, ensuring that no royal visits to China from the Tran dynasty, highlighting their resolve to maintain their sovereignty at any cost. This period of conflict culminated in the acknowledgement by the Yuan dynasty of the Vietnamese and Cham kingdom's status, leading to the establishment of tributary relations rather than direct Yuan rule. Back in Champa, the acceptance of Yuan supremacy marked the end of Mongol military ambitions in the region. The strategic marriage in 1305 between the Cham king Tre Man and the Vietnamese princess Huyen Tran, which included the cession of two provinces to Dai Viet, further exemplified the intertwined fates of the regional powers, setting the stage for continued Cham-Vietnamese conflict over the newly ceded territories, planting a seed for further wars. We'll never run out of them. Well, all in all, the legacy of the Mongol invasions in Dai Viet and Champa, it certainly is a complex story. While the invasions are seen as military failures for the Mongols due to their inability to secure direct control, they did succeed in establishing tributary relationships that allowed for some degree of political influence. It's not what they wanted, but it's what they got. In Vietnamese historiography, these events are celebrated as defining moments of resistance and endurance, with figures like Prince Trần Hồng Dao immortalized as national heroes who defended Vietnamese autonomy against formidable odds. Perhaps next time you see a Vietnamese person, have the pleasure to have a conversation with those lovely people, or the greater pleasure of visiting their countries, you may be lucky enough to hear about how they beat the Mongols. Although, maybe everyone's account is going to be a little one-sided. But that's just the way it is. Well, what is not one-sided is my love for the audience who make it an hour into the videos. You know, I sit here sometimes and I do wonder if anybody out there is listening all this way. And if you are, well, I'm sure you've learned something. I would like to thank my top-tier patrons, that is, Britt, Charles, Stark Factory, JC, Jeffrey, Wendy, and Tim, all complete chads in their own right. And I'd like to thank you again for getting this far. I will see you in the next video. Good night, everyone, and take care of each other. For me. See you next time.